That's when the one with Cher, is that what it was called? Yeah, that, and then, Raising California, man.
So Arizona. Yeah.
All right, I think we can go here. All right, I think we can get going here this morning. Welcome to, block that out. Global Affairs Unfiltered. I am Jack Stockwell here on the 18th day of November, 2025, sitting on top of a large powder keg. Now, I believe there's a cloud flare. A lot of you, whether you are aware of it or not, use cloud flare in a lot of your communications and the work that you do and on the internet. And Cloudflare has had some rather big problems as of this morning, and it's telling me as a result, I might not be streaming. And that would be too bad, to say the least. Oh, there it's hooking up now. So welcome to those of you on the stream. Welcome to those of you at K-Talk Radio. A lot of things to talk about. The big event that's going to happen that will not happen, of course, is the vote on the Epstein files. And the reason I say it's not going to happen is because there's an awful lot more people than President Trump who have reason to fear, as some of the slimiest creatures on the planet that could possibly be revealed in the work that's going on with the Epstein files are members of our own Congress, the House and Senate. And so there's all this talk, President Trump keeps going back and forth between what's legal and what's embarrassing, and the loss of power that will follow the loss of mystique. And so last night, President Trump stated on his Truth Social account that he's reversing his course in the matter of the Epstein files and now supports their full release. I got some things I want to say about this, but one thing I also want to say is that, as is usually the case, in my humble opinion, that anything that occupies front and center news is to cover up something else. That's kind of usually the case. Anytime you got caught with your hand in a cookie jar, weren't you trying to change the dynamic of what was being discussed? So that when your mother saw your hand in the cookie jar, you talked about how blessed you are to have a mother like her, and that you're going to do everything you can to make her happy and make her proud of you, and how wonderful she looks in her robe and slippers this morning as you were getting ready to run off to school, and you try to change the dynamic of what's taking place in order to slip out the door unimpeded. Well, I think there's something what's the big scandal? What's the big scandal with the Epstein files? Underage girls being sex trafficked is the thing that they talk about the most. I think there's something worse than that. Is there something worse than trafficking underage girls with these monsters in Congress? Yeah, I think there is. I think there's something a lot worse than that, and I think it's trafficking with Israel and the Mossad and the international conspiracies to turn America into Israel first instead of America first. And I think that's probably an awful lot that might be revealed through these files, is how in compromising positions, government officials have been turned over to the Mossad and Sinn Féin and the other organizations that are involved with making sure that America goes from America first to Israel first. Although that's starting to lose ground. It's starting to lose ground rapidly. Now, the House Republicans, according to Now, I'm going to quote directly from President Trump here. This is from Truth Social. He said, as I said on Friday night aboard Air Force One to fake news media, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide. And it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on the Democrat shutdown. Now, there's more here to quote, but I want to say this at the outset. There's always something else being covered up. There's always something else being hidden. And as I tried to do as good a job, reporting this yesterday as I did on these Epstein files about how, several months ago, Pam Bondi and Kash Patel said, there they are, there's the files piled up on the desk. They're all ready to go. And then, of course, all of a sudden, they go missing. Well, this always happens before redacted stuff takes place. Now, apparently, the files are back, and the House is going to vote. And I'm telling you right now, the House is not going to vote to let those files out. With all the hubbub that's going on, President Trump trying to take the spotlight off of him, turn it over to the House isn't going to vote for that stuff because there's too many people in the House who will be at the end of a rope if that stuff is fully released. On the one hand, on the other hand, what do you do? What do you do with files that go missing and then suddenly show up again, as was the case with the JFK files? Suddenly it looks like black sheets of paper, black magic markers marking out everything you could possibly use to implicate anything for any possible violation of ethics or the law or anything else. Suddenly it's gone into a big old black streak across the paper. I don't know if that kind of thinking got beat into me as a kid or what, but that's kind of how I look at this. It's just a big game, and this is to take attention right now off of the U.S. Gerald Ford building everything ready for an attack on Venezuela. And then as this Epstein file reaches a crisis point, news will drop it because they'll go for the attack that's going on with Venezuela. You don't have to be a prophet to see this stuff coming. All you got to do is just watch the news over a few decades, and you see how these things take place behind the curtain. Now, I want to get back to what President Trump said here. He said, they're trying to take away from our victory of the Democrat shutdown. The Department of Justice has already turned over tens of thousands of pages to the public on Epstein and are looking at various Democrat operatives, Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, Larry Summers, and their relationship to Epstein, and the House Oversight Committee can have whatever they are legally entitled to. I don't care. And this was all in caps. I don't care. I wonder if he cares in the files that have already come out, that his name has been mentioned over 1,300 times. President Trump's name was mentioned in the released files so far more than any other name. What does that mean? Well, it means he and Epstein were close. What does that mean? Well, you could take that to mean anything you want. It doesn't prove anything. You can't indict anybody by having a close friendship with someone who was a billionaire crook and a pedophile. Well, that could apply to a lot of different people, couldn't it? However, President Trump says they can have whatever they're legally entitled to, the House Oversight Committee. I don't care. All I do care about is the Republicans get back on point, which is the economy, affordability, where we are winning big. Our victory on reducing inflation from the highest level in history to practically nothing, bringing down prices for the American people, delivering historic tax cuts, gaining trillions of dollars of investment into America, a record, the rebuilding of our military, securing our border, deporting criminal illegal aliens, ending men and women's sports, stopping transgender for it just shows you what kind of a dark cave we're coming out of. With all these things, all the money, all the political stuff, all of the geoengineering and the and the military and the wars and killing and everything else, and right in the middle of it, men and women's sports, stopping transgender, and so much more. Nobody cared about Jeffrey Epstein when he was alive, and if the Democrats had anything, they would have released it before our landslide election victory. Good point. Some members of the Republican Party are being used, and we can't let that happen. Let's start talking about the Republican Party's record-setting achievements and not fall into the Epstein trap, which is actually a curse on the Democrats, not us. Make America great again. So I've kind of been wondering if the hypothesis that Epstein's primary weapon was the use of underage girls might not be a red herring. Because again, it's what's out there in the forefront. It's the dodge. It's the red herring. It's to take your attention off of, don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. Just look up there on the screen at this big glowing sun-shaped face of the great Oz. Don't worry about that. Pay attention to the show that's in front of you. Same thing with the magicians. You see the wonder that takes place in the eyes of little kids when you've hired a magician to come to your little kid's birthday party, and they're just sitting there they're just leaning forward and their eyes are bugging out of their heads, and you're standing off to the side and you can see what the magician's doing, the sleight of hand. And you're looking at it and you're going, yeah. Oh, I saw that. Oh, you're not going to fool me. But to the kids, just the absolute wonderment of the entertainment that's going on in front of them. And then, of course, as they get older, when they begin to realize that adults lie, even in the fanciful form of a magician showing up at a child's birthday party, and then they become a part of the game themselves, and they begin to understand, if they pay attention to what's going on around them, that what's going on around them is a red herring, a dodge, covering up what's really taking place behind the scenes. And so, just like 9/11, in order to institute the Patriot Act, how are we ever going to get the Patriot Act passed on these people so we can now surveil every single living American from birth up to the coffin? How are we ever going to pull this off? Well, they pulled it off. Now, so what I'm saying is I'm wondering if what Epstein's primary weapon in getting control of these people, and remember I mentioned, I think there were 28 rooms in his mansion in Manhattan, every room with multiple cameras. I mean, who in their right mind would walk into the middle of something like that and just think, oh, Jeffrey, he's just a good old boy. Bring in the girls. Without ever having a thought in the back of their mind that what they are about to do not only is some of the most horrible behavior we could perform, not only is it unethical, but it's incredibly illegal and can send you to prison for years, as should be the case. Now, what happened between these people and women of age, 18 years and older, in consenting situations, may or may not necessarily carry prison sentences. But under 18, it certainly does. And so that's where the attention has been, is the underage girls. But maybe there's something else going on here, which has always been, I think I can credit my 12th grade English teacher. First name was James. I just suddenly recently forgot his last name. Just a short little guy, but full of wisdom. Should have been teaching on a college level, and he introduced us into English literature. And the whole class was based on every week reading some English novel. And then you had to read it over the weekend, and then you knew 2 or 3 novels in advance, so you had plenty of time to read these things. And then you talk about him each day. And then on Friday, you had to write a 500-word essay. Well, we didn't have artificial intelligence back then. We did have Cliff Notes, but we didn't have AI. And so you had to write a 500-word essay on the book, about anything in the book you wanted to write about, but a 500-word essay. And of course, he knew whether you were copying somebody else, whether you were sending out a bunch of BS, or if you actually had some profound impact from reading the book that would come through in your essay. And one of the things that he got us to learn was awareness, to just simply be aware that when you're reading a subject line, when you're reading a theme, a concept that the author is trying to bring across your mind in nothing more than words, to be aware of under themes, to be aware of what's going on behind the scenes, to as you're reading the plot unfolding in front of you, know that there's subplots and that there's other things going on. And that goes back to my 12th grade English teacher. And so that's been with me my whole life. And then when I started talk radio there in March of 95, thanks to Starley, and then thanks to Dick and Tom thereafter that I could stay on the radio, that's always been another thing, another theme. So someone is dangling this object out in front of us, glittery, like a dance hall mirror lamp over the ceiling, and to keep your attention on that and not so much which is going on around you. Well, I kind of imagine a picture where Epstein, or those who were controlling Epstein, those who are still alive who controlled Epstein, and remember, this is a college dropout who ends up a billionaire and has associations with anybody that's anybody, either to his Manhattan apartments, to the island, to Israel, wherever. Anybody that was anybody was shoulder to shoulder to Epstein. But Epstein had his controllers. And I think they've used this representation that underage girls were present at these social gatherings to obviously amplify the force of blackmail. Epstein could have insinuated that underage girls were present and used it as a pretext for letting the attendees know, months, maybe years later, that law enforcement had started asking questions. So, you have a certain member of the Senate that's sitting on an intelligence committee who gets a little encoded note from Jeffrey Epstein. Dear Senator so-and-so, remember that Christmas party back in 2003? Remember little Holly? I've got something you might want to see. No insinuations here, Senator. No arm twisting, no blackmail. But you have a vote coming up on a certain item of intelligence involving Israeli security with their presence with AIPAC. Just want you to think about that and think about little old Holly. Oh, and by the way, Senator, the FBI has been asking some questions about that. No threat. No, I'm not trying to upset your day. I don't want to. I don't want you to come off track from where you're going to be sitting at committee today. Just wanted you to know. So, Epstein could have said something to the effect, oh, one more thing, Senator. I've got you covered. I'll keep you posted, but I got you covered. I got your back, Senator. Don't worry. And that sort of question may be characterized as primarily psychological in nature, a way of instilling fear, paranoia, and compliance. That psychological terror would be, I think, further amplified once the word got out that that senator would start telling some of his buddies, oh my goodness, do you know that Epstein, the good old Jeffrey, installed hidden video cameras in all of these properties that he has? And then at that point, the guys who attended the events would find themselves in a catch-22. Those who were confident that they had not broken any law would want to exculpate themselves by proclaiming, I don't care if the files are released, I have nothing to hide. Well, the trouble is that though they may not have anything illegal to hide, the disclosure of documents and images could nevertheless prove to be extremely embarrassing for them, whether they did anything or not, in proximity to those who did. As Machiavelli pointed out in his 1513 pamphlet, The Prince, rulers must only present themselves to the people that they rule in a formal, ceremonious way that maximizes their mystique. Makes me think of the royal family. Makes me think of the royal family being beyond anything like this, except for the king's brother. So once the ruler is shown to be an ordinary mortal, like Prince Andrew, I said his name. He's not a prince anymore. Brother Andrew. Once the ruler is shown to be an ordinary mortal with ordinary vices, then the mystique is lost, and the plebeians will cease thinking that he has any power left or that they have any obeisance towards that rapidly dwindling power. This is why the British royal family is now widely regarded as an embarrassing joke. I have long since if I started in 95, Clinton was still president. And so from Clinton on, what was one of the first things the newly elected president of the United States did? One of the first things within the first 2 weeks, including President Trump and his first administration, running over to Balmoral or Buckingham or wherever to kiss the ass of Queen Elizabeth, right there in TV in front of everybody. Did I say that? Well, once the males in the family are perceived to be ordinary weak men with ordinary weak men's vices, they're done for. Now, listen, I'm no paragon of virtue. I mean, I've had my issues, my problems. They go way, way back. But it wouldn't surprise me if the final cache of the Epstein files does not reveal anything illegal, but just turns out to be just cringeworthy in the extreme. In other words, what does get through, what isn't going to get through is the illegal stuff. What does get through, you're going to go, oh, how embarrassing. You wouldn't want to be caught with photos like that. Clothed. Nothing illegal in the photo, but just the setting. At the age differences of people sitting on people's laps and whatever else. Now, if I'm correct, the great lords of this world will be exposed not so much as pedophiles, but as weak and debased flesh, no different from any of us, apart, of course, from their great wealth and their privilege. And at that point, the plebeians will just marvel that the great lords of the earth are a bunch of self-indulgent, immoral clowns. So, when you review the personal conflict that was going on between Gaius Octavius, who later became Emperor Augustus, and Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, historians have pointed out that Octavian had the advantage of personal discipline, while Antony, of course, was given to sensuality to maintain his power, especially with Cleopatra. If you ever saw the HBO series Rome, and it's pretty risque, but of all the characters that are in that series, 2 years, two series, multiple episodes over 2 years, Octavius comes across, it's just amazing, who becomes Emperor Augustus because of his relationship to Caesar. Stands as a real paragon of virtue, counterposed by Mark Antony's licentiousness. In Rome, it was claimed that Antony had been ruined by that harlot queen Cleopatra, while Octavian always stayed true to the Stoic principles for which Stoicism is based on to some degree, that he had learned from his tutors. Now, if the Epstein files are ultimately disclosed in their entirety, and I think the House is not going to allow it. I think the vote is today, maybe tomorrow, but maybe today. I think the House is going to vote it down. The upshot may be that powerful men of disciplined habits will survive the scandal, while those given to sensuality and self-indulgence will lose their superhuman mystique, and with it their power, followed by their resignations. But I don't know if it's going to get that far. I'm not so sure it is. So, as President Trump is just under this increasing pressure around his relationship to Epstein, as augmented by these generous servings of media spin, he has turned to a time-tested counterattack, which can be paraphrased as, if you do that, I'll bring the whole house down. Which is kind of reminds me of the famous pre-sentencing message that was sent by accused Watergate burglar James McCord, who was a former CIA officer and security expert for Nixon's 1972 re-election campaign, to Nixon aide Jack Caulfield. And McCord warned bluntly about the consequences of throwing CIA Director Richard Helms under the bus. He said, and it became a matter of record as it was released later on, if Richard Helms goes, if the Watergate operation is laid at the CIA's feet, where it does not belong, every tree in the forest will fall. It will be a scorched desert. Then President Trump posting on Truth Social the other day, now the Democrats are using the Epstein hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans, to try and deflect from their disastrous shutdown and all of their other failures. I will be asking Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, together with our great patriots at the FBI, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, J.P. Morgan, Chase, and many other people and institutions to determine what was going on with them and him. This is another Russia scam, with all arrows pointing to the Democrats. Records show that these men and many others spent large portions of their life with Epstein on his island. Stay tuned. I'm sorry, but when President Trump's name is mentioned more than anybody else in the files that have come out so far, spent large portions of their life with Epstein. You know, I voted for him. I voted for him considering the alternative. I voted for him based on his campaign promises. And he has taken care of the border. And he is cleaning up the people in this country who should not be here, the bad ones first. And he is doing something about trade imbalances. And he is doing something with, I believe, trying to end what's going on in the Ukraine, although he just sent more money. He just sent more money. Of course, it's to go to European nations to buy American weapons so that the European nations can deliver them to the Ukraine to use against Russia. Russia just fired one of their Iskanders and took out several HIMARS that they discovered that were hidden in the forests. But they found them from the drones. HIMARS just took, or Iskanders just took them out. So that's it with Epstein. Well, I don't know if that's it with Epstein or not, but it's going to be for this morning, something else might leak out of my head. Now, I want to repeat something I was talking about yesterday, and that is I implore you as K-Talk listeners, and those of you who are on the stream, I think most of you started out as K-Talk listeners, is to give a hearty thanks to Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee, and Congressman Blake Moore for the work that they have done with working families tax cut. I gave you their phone numbers yesterday. I'm going to give you their phone number again today. Because there is an agency that is paying K-Talk to advertise this stuff. And you have probably been hearing the advertisement showing up twice an hour, which is more than they paid for, over the last few days, while we're still trying to get some of the computer equipment and the tower and everything all coordinated at the radio station and get some people back on the air live. A lot of it's been, replayed stuff, which isn't so bad. So I'm going to give you their phone numbers. And all I'm asking on behalf of K-Talk Radio, of Dick and Kristen, and certainly Paul Jensen and the others who have helped, that you call these phone numbers and just say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of K-Talk Radio. That I would really like to thank Senator Lee or Congressman Moore for the work they did in the big, beautiful bill of making sure the working families tax cut was in there. So to call Senator Lee, you would call 202-225-5444. 202-225-5444. For Congressman Moore, Blake Moore, I think that's 4th District, isn't it? You would call, but you don't have to be in Blake Moore's district. Just being a K-Talk listener, I don't care where you're at. I don't care if you're in Minnesota listening right now. If you could call 202-225-0453. 202-225-0453. And Congressman Moore's office and say, I'm calling on behalf of K-Talk Radio, where we heard all about the work that they've done. And we just wanted to express, along with the K-Talk family, our sincere appreciation for the work they did on the working families tax cut. And that's it. You don't have to do anything else. It won't put you on a list, except the list of the good guys. All right, some other stuff I want to talk about. I wanted to talk about this yesterday. I didn't get time to get into it. Tucker Carlson blasting the Israel First attempted takeover of the Republican Party. Back on November 13th, Tucker Carlson held this special monologue, which featured a discussion of the ongoing debate over Israel and how it fits into the America First movement in the United States. And Carlson's comment, by America First, whenever President Trump walks into a boxing match, a football game, college or NFL, a baseball game, whatever else, what does the crowd do? USA, 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 USA. That's what you call America first. Now imagine President Trump showing up at these same events, and the crowd started shouting, Israel, Israel, Israel. Does that sound silly? Does that sound stupid? I hope it sounds shocking, because that's kind of where we're headed. And so Carlson's comments on this issue underscore the fact that there is a raging debate, as he describes it, within the political right in this country, a fight which Carlson has said has been going on since Trump's inauguration. So Carlson described how Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was the first foreign leader to visit Trump after his inauguration. Netanyahu was the first and only foreign leader who, 2 days after the execution of Charlie Kirk, we didn't do it. We did. What are you looking at us for? We didn't do it. That's not a laughing matter. It's just so ridiculous. I can't help but smile. Anyway, Netanyahu was the first foreign leader to visit Trump after his inauguration, not because of any particularly warm relations between the two, because the word on the street is they despise each other, but because Netanyahu wanted to secure America's support for Israel's desire to carry out Israel's wet dream of a regime change in Iran. Now, that may be understandable interest on the part of Israel, Carlson said. But what if you're an American? What if you're an America first kind of a person? What if you're an American that knows at least 3 or 4 of the first 10 amendments? Not necessarily in order. What if you're an American that grew up in an elementary school where you said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag growing up? What if you're an American who was taught as a child the concepts of the Founding Fathers? You'd have to be in a special school, because public school wouldn't be doing that. What if you're an American that likes healthy debate, that likes to hear both sides of the story and you make up your mind yourself as to which one you want, rather than allowing these kinds of topics to be left no longer to healthy debate, but to pro-Israel zealots like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro. You know, I used to like Mark Levin. I used to think he made some pretty good logical arguments. But this Mark Levin that has come out of the skin of the previous Mark Levin have ended up labeling almost anyone who questions American-Israeli policies leading away from Israel first as being anti-Semites. I've had a couple of my listeners who also are patients who pointed out to me in the privacy of a treatment room, Jack, you could be called an anti-Semite. I said, well, I've been called a lot worse than that, but I have no problem with Jewish people. My problem with what's going on in the Middle East is called genocide. It's called right-wing lunatic Likud party members whose primary interest is not the safety of Israeli citizens or the promotion of a safe and healthy Israel, but they're committed to crazy, religious-driven, and when religion is driving something, you can almost always bet it's crazy, concept that anything less than them is relegated to Amalekites Amalekites, which is worthy of death. Now, Levin recently called Carlson, along with other conservative commentators, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, Steve Bannon, as being Marxist, Islamist, American-hating, Jew-hating thugs. I heard him say that, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mark Levin on his program, finally the outer skin was shed off and the inner skin of who he really is comes out. Now, Candace Owens has carried some themes pretty far, I admit. Megyn Kelly, Steve Bannon, and it's definitely Carlson. But to call them Marxist, Islamist, American-hating, Jew-hating thugs is a bridge too far. Carlson even compares today's pro-Israel fanaticism to the anti-Putin fanaticism that has infected Washington for recent years. However, Carlson's point is not merely to just try to expose the absurdity of these claims, but rather to show the true mask of these characters being revealed. As I said, the old skin that we knew them by is gone. The new skin of who they really are is emerging, showing an arrogance that views the average American with contempt, just like the woke elites they supposedly oppose. So most Americans are far more concerned about the current struggles of life, the cost of health care, the economy, the impossible weight of unpayable debt. They don't care who controls Russia or whether Iran should be eliminated. That's not in their family discussions. That's not what occupies their prayers at night, nor the discussions they have with members of the family or people at work. All these issues pretty quickly get to the question of economics and usury. So he noted the emergence of debt slavery in the United States and extreme usury exacted upon the poor and the younger generations. And this is a conversation that the same establishment talking heads absolutely do not want to have. And so in the same fashion, Carlson ridicules the fact that anyone who wants to talk about these issues are called communists and are quickly discarded. He even mentioned that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has banned usury, a commendable achievement. Yet you're not allowed to talk about that, because if you say anything positive about Maduro, you're a communist. So clearly the old artificial divides are ending, and the chains of groupthink are being overcome, because there is a growing groundswell in this country that they've been duped. The average American is beginning to realize they've been duped with all this Israel first and Israel can't do anything wrong concept, which brings me to the USS Gerald Ford en route from the Eastern Atlantic into the direction of the Caribbean. Trinidad and Tobago Attorney General John Jeremy, writing in the Financial Times last Friday, I think it was, that the U.S. Marines deployed in the region would intensify exercises in the two-island country in the coming days. Trinidad and Tobago are located right off the coast of Venezuela, and the American mobilization there is part of the growing U.S. threat of military action against Venezuela. Are there troops, American troops in Trinidad and Tobago? Yeah, they're all part of the collective. And the USS Gerald Ford, the task force was in an unknown location, somewhere en route in the direction of the Caribbean. It's beginning to be obvious where they're headed. And that could break out this week. And at this, I think more often than not, I'm right when it comes to these predictions. Although I've made some big predictions that were very, very wrong. But I think what's going to happen in this debate over the Epstein files, the House is going to turn it down. The House is not going to, the Oversight Committee is not going to let those files out. Because there's probably people sitting on the Oversight Committee who are in some rather compromising pictures. And I'm not saying that just because of something to say shocking on the radio. I mean, it's in all the news releases. More and more as this stuff is being exposed as to what's going on here. But at the midst of the possibility that this could be released, that will signal the attack on Venezuela. Now, John Jeremy, who is the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, he said this: "We are engaged with our friends in the North in a series of exercises. We have a problem with gangs and drugs and criminal activity, including gang-related homicides and so on, and those things are directly linked to the flow of drugs and ammunition from Venezuela." He added that Trinidad and Tobago were comfortable with an ally providing assistance. Not saying who the ally is, but we know who the ally is. He said, "I don't think there's a direct line between exercises and the administration's readiness to intervene in Venezuela. But the fact that so much firepower is deployed to the region is incredibly significant." Then he added that his country, quote, "not accustomed to having American warships pull up, and that when people see men with guns, they draw conclusions which perhaps they ought not to draw." He said that Trinidad and Tobago are required to cooperate with terms of allowing allowing the access to U.S. forces due to an agreement with the U.S. on military-to-military engagement that was indefinitely renewed last December. Then the Financial Times coverage came as the news reports emerged of a 20th U.S. strike against an alleged drug smuggling boat. And an unnamed Pentagon official confirmed to CBS News that the attack targeted a vessel in the Caribbean Sea on November 11th and killed 4 people on board. Now, I could go into that further, but I'm not going to bother. There's so many other things I want to talk about. Am I going to get into an update or this crazy thing that happened in the White House? What time is it? Oh gosh, it's almost top of the hour. When I found out that Muhammad al-Jawlani was going to show up in the White House and meet with the president, again, I thought that was a joke. I thought they were kidding. But they published a picture, MAGA Donald Trump and former al-Qaeda leader Muhammad al-Jawlani smiling with the U.S. flag in the background between them. And besides showering compliments on this one-time cutter off of people's heads, President Trump also backed this former terrorist and said he believes that the young man has a lot of promise. This young man, see, he's not dressed in his old al-Jawlani outfit of a wrap around his head and the big long beard and the clothing of Islamic terrorists. He's there with a red power tie, white shirt and suit. Still got a little bit of a beard, but now it's nicely trimmed. And President Trump says he has a lot of promise. I wonder how many videos President Trump has seen of al-Jawlani cutting people's heads off. And he says he has a real shot at doing a good job in war-ravaged Syria, which Netanyahu has essentially said, Syria is ours. Lebanon is ours. So as he's celebrating this new Syrian president and the people of Syria by lifting all sanctions, which had been in place for nearly 5 decades, since 1979, against the old ruling elite of Syria. And according to the U.S. State Department, al-Jawlani, prior to becoming president of Syria, was the senior leader of al-Nusra, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, which was supported covertly by U.S., NATO, Saudi Arabia, and the Turkish High Command. And so Jawlani became president of Syria in last year, and the decision to cancel the U.S. State Department stop this terrorist up to $10 million reward was carried out in December 2024 in the immediate wake of Trump's victory of the presidential elections. So the U.S. State Department under Joe Biden removed the $10 million reward for Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, and the specialty designated global terrorist who leads the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which Department of State describes as a branch of al-Qaeda. And then the bounty of Jawlani was finally removed. Jawlani, the $10 million bounty, was finally removed as the U.S. Secretary of State of Near Eastern Affairs, Barbara Leaf, met with him and other Hayat Tahrir al-Sham leaders December 20 of last year. And in its $10 million reward for Jawlani, the State Department noted that under Jawlani's leadership, the al-Nusra Front carried out multiple terrorist attacks throughout Syria against civilians. Then in March of last year, he was instated president of Syria, courtesy of Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden. Now, don't take this seriously, but my question to President Trump, why on earth did you not arrest this bad guy and cash in on the modest reward of $10 million when he walked into the Oval Office? Why didn't you have the FBI there handcuff this man and haul him off to jail? So visibly, according to Donald Trump, Jawlani is a friend of America. Now there's some contradictions. I mean, the evidence suggests that that Jawlani firmly endorsed al-Qaeda's alleged attack against the United States on 9/11. And as we might recall, the 9/11 alleged al-Qaeda attack was used as a pretext and, of course, a justification to invade Afghanistan barely a month later on October 7th, and then in December, the passing of the Patriot Act. And it's, one of those rare times I'm caught without words. Caught without words because I can't believe. It just tells you that President Trump's not in control. His handlers are in control. Now, I could go into that a little bit further, but if you've followed the news at all, you know who this al-Jawlani is. And you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And I can remember the news coverage of his particular al-Nusra buddies actually taking Christians and cutting off their heads. And al-Qaeda, that once was our enemies, they're now our friends. Because as President Trump said, this young man has a lot of promise. He's got a really good shot at doing a really good job. So what this implies is that the model of U.S. warfare consists in recruiting and training al-Qaeda mercenaries with a view to destroying democratically elected governments, as is what's happened in Syria. And then the second phase consists in regime change, which consists in appointing mercenary terrorists to high office within the neo-colonial structure, because al-Jilani is not going to have the last word in the ruling of Syria. Netanyahu is. I just, week to week, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys? It all depends on which way the wind's blowing, and who is advantaged by what. And what's this all over? Well, on the one hand, Israel needs Syria for its greater ground coverage as it goes to greater Israel, Eretz Israel. But they want complete control of the oil and the gas pipeline that is going to come from the Gaza oil gas fields, bypassing the Russian portion and going straight to Turkey and over into southern Europe, bypassing the Urals. That's what this whole thing has been about anyway, from the very beginning. Who's going to control the flow of natural gas? See, these things aren't that hard to figure out anymore. All you have to do is see what the current news release is saying, and you know that it's probably, that that's not true. It's just a cover. It's a red herring. And then look at the themes that are going on behind it. Who stands to gain is one of the major laws, one of the major things to consider. Now, I want to mention again the special that I have in my office. Also, we have our Black Friday coming up. Those of you who are a part of our news network will be announced, told when this takes place. It's an annual sale where we have the best discounts possible with the products that we sell. That'll be coming up here very shortly. If you are not on that list, if you call the office, 801-523-1890, you can get your email in there and be notified when these incredible sales take place. But also a sale on what I do structurally to the spine. I'm taking care of 2 people for the price of 1. And if you don't have 2 people and you would still like to have a consultation with me, no pressure whatsoever, no obligation. Just sit down and talk about the problems you're having. And you don't have somebody else to do the 2-for-1. Just tell them that you heard me say on K-Talk and on the stream that that's okay. I'll just take care of you by yourself at half price. And that goes through the rest of this month and through December. After December 31st, it'll go back to where it was before. But it's the annual thank you for the support that I received from the K-Talk audience in building my practice. So you would call the office, 801-523-1890, to schedule a consultation, or you can go to jackstockwell.com and schedule one there, and then we'll get back to you to tie down a good time. All right, we're coming up to the end of the program this morning. Boy, that went by fast. Well, keep your eyes open about the Epstein file debate vote. Again, to repeat myself, I vote that the House is going to turn it down. They're not going to release the files because some of the scummiest people who live in this country are elected officials in our federal government. And they don't want to be exposed any more than anybody else. And whatever does come out will be so redacted, it'll look like a blackboard. All right, that'll do it. For those of you on the stream, I'm going to end the stream right now. Thank you for your attention. If you can subscribe and like, it helps the algorithm to spread this program. I'll see you all tomorrow with a health show that I guarantee you don't want to miss. Boink.